I've made another heart quilt. This one is a rumpled heart with a nice fringe border. Last time when I was making this other heart quilt, my raggedy heart quilt, I told you that it was based on an inspiration by an artist who uses Ankara fabric on canvas. I realized as I was making this quilt that this does not really look like the inspiration. So I decided to make this quilt, which looks a little bit closer to what the inspiration art looked like. The artist uses Ankara fabric on canvas. She doesn't quilt it, but I thought I would go ahead and try to translate that into fabric as much as I could. Let me show you how I made this quilt. So I started the same way with the sandwich. So I've made a sandwich that's 8.5 by 11. This is the backing, there's the batting, and then I created the top, which is 8.5 by 11, which is the size of a journal quilt. I pressed some heat and bond fusible to some fabric, and then I cut out a heart shape, and then I kept trimming it down until it was the shape that I wanted so that it would fit onto the quilt top. And I went ahead and fused this onto the quilt while I was waiting for the camera to charge up. And so now I have a quilt top that is fused with a heart and is ready for the next step. I've also chosen this ribbon that I think will look good around the corner of this. It's not the exact same color, but I think this looks pretty good to me right now. I might change my mind under different lighting conditions, but I think it'll look good regardless, even though it's not the same exact color. This is blue and green, and the pinks are different. I still think that it'll look good, and I might just go ahead and sew this down so that I don't change my mind about using it. I think this is going to add a nice festive look to the quilt, finish it off really nicely, and it'll be a nice way to present this quilt overall. It's really tempting just to leave it like that once I finish that off, but what I want to do is to go ahead and try to use that technique that was used by the quilter who we were looking at earlier. I don't know the technique, but the way I'm thinking that happened is that she has some parts that are laid blank, as in she doesn't add extra fabric to it. So there's some that are left plain, if we can call it plain. And then it kind of looks to me like she's crumpled up some other fabric, and then she's put them in certain areas, and she's more careful about where she places the colors and everything. I thought this would be good to put the heart all the way throughout the background, so even if some little parts show through, that it would still look good. So it looks like she's just kind of chosen different places on where she wants certain colors, and then other places where she wants other colors. And I've just cut regular, I've freeformed. I didn't use a rotary cutter to cut these. I just cut them from the scraps from the quilts I was already making. And then I could just place the colors where they go. I don't really know whether I should put mix and match some so that they're not exactly the same everywhere. I'll have to be a little bit more careful with this one because it doesn't have the same on both sides. But if I just, maybe I can do different shapes. But it seems like she mostly just did particular shapes because it seems like this accordion would be good. Maybe I can go ahead and just riff on her technique. I'm not sure. Leave some parts blank, leave some parts like this. And then I also have a lighter color here that I thought would look good with this quilt, just to have some variety in here. I think those are the only colors that I have available right now for this technique that match this. This is a little scary because I like the way it looks without the extra fabric and the extra texture, But I do want to try out this new technique, so I'm gonna have to brave it and just try to sew some. So the way it looks, she just crumples up some fabric and puts it beside here loosely. And then, or I think free motion quilting would work the best anyway, is to just position I'll probably work on one color at a time, position where I want this to be, and then just sew it down and then work on the next color. I think probably would work the best. I'm just trying to decide while I'm doing this is whether I want to maybe add some other colors so it doesn't look like completely plain with just one color on one side. But I think it'll still be fine because of the various colors in the fabric. So just sew this part down here. I'll go ahead and I like that pleating thing, so I'll just pleat something maybe all the way across and then do a lighter color somewhere else, and that way I like the way this looks. It just wasn't sure about how it all looks together, but I think it's just because it's too lumpy. But now, like, if I just sew this down, I think that will look pretty good. And I'll just have to be careful not to flatten it too much while I'm doing this. I think that's the tendency that I'm going to have, is to try to flatten it, and the key is to leave some lumps and ripples and, you know, texture into the quilt. My dog is playing outside with her squeaky ball. She has a good time with that ball. Okay, so there's more here. I'm going to go ahead and sew like a batch. I think, and she puts a lot of, like, she has control over where she wants to put the fabric. And so maybe I'll just put my pleats here, and then maybe I'll just make like a section where I decide that I'm going to put this color. Like that, something like that. Okay, so we're going to head on over to the machine and work on some free motion quilting. Since I have the walking foot on the machine now, I'm going to work on this pleated thing first. The pleated sash first, and then I'll just use a straight line for that since I have the walking foot on. And then once I'm done with that, then I can switch to the free motion foot to do the rest of the applique. Looks like I'm curving it a little bit, but I think it'll be good that way. Here it is. I finished sewing all of the folds into the quilt. I really like all the different texture that it creates, little lumps and bumps, but it's not too much. There's the African fabric, there's a batik, and there's the other batik. I had all the light colors and I really didn't like the way it was looking with the black thread, so I went ahead and added a lot of this on top of it, and I think it adds a nice layer of texture. And even though there's some of the little lights are peeking through the back, which is nice. And then on the back, I did have a stowaway, but I was able to just cut off that piece and not worry about it. And you can see all the different designs on here that I used to add the applique. Like we did for the last quilt, I'm going to trim a little bit of this back here to make it stay with the heart shape. I don't think there's going to be that much trimming needed on this quilt. So I have gone ahead and trimmed the quilt. I like the little peaks of the background that's showing through. Glad I used that as a back. The important thing about sewing this much texture into the quilt is to make sure that all of the fabric stays underneath the presser foot, because any part that goes over the presser foot, sometimes it sews on both sides, and then you wind up having the fabric kind of stuck to your sewing machine. And so, but the nice thing about this technique is that you can just cut off the parts that are in the way, because it's all raw edge. It's not going to really matter in the end, and you won't be able to tell that happened. So now I'm going to go ahead and sew the tassel all the way around the quilt. have it, another beautiful Valentine's Day quilt. I like the fringe on the border. I rounded the corners a little bit so that it would have a nice little touch, little soft touch. I hope you had a great Valentine's Day and a great season of love throughout the year. I hope that this project gave you some inspiration on how to make your next art quilt. If you missed the video on how I made this quilt, I'll post a link to that on this page. Thank you for watching. I appreciate all of your support, and we'll see you in the next video.